Hiya! Now, children in year one this half term are going to be learning about the Titanic, which is a big, big ship over 100 years ago. And because of that, Mrs. Race and Miss Scott want you to listen to this story, and that's called Samson's Titanic Journey. Now, it's a bit longer than my other stories, so stick with it, okay? Good. Samson was so excited. He had lived in the shipyard in Belfast since he was a baby mouse, but never before has much fuss been made about a ship. The beautiful new luxury liner called Titanic was about to be launched. The shipyard workers had been building it for months, and now the day had arrived when it would finally set sail for Southampton. Samson was going too. He had decided to leave his hometown in search of a better life in America, and he couldn't think of a more spectacular way to get there than travelling on board Titanic. As the final preparations for launch were put in place, Samson slipped stealthily aboard. He watched the exciting spectators waving madly from the docks as Titanic sailed splendidly down Belfast Lough. Once Titanic had travelled out to sea, Samson found a cosy little corner in one of the ship's huge boilers, unpacked his belongings, and unrolled his pretty patchwork blanket. Snuggled securely in his new bed, he fell fast asleep. It didn't seem long before they reached Southampton. Again there was a huge buzz of excitement as many passengers began to board Titanic. Samson was no longer alone in the boiler room. Other rats and mice had arrived on board and were beginning to settle down for the long journey to America. There were lots of noise and fuss, so Samson decided to go out on deck to get some fresh air. Titanic was just about to set sail on her maiden voyage to America. Hundreds of people gathered to watch and wave. Fancy cars were being lifted on board, and ladies in beautiful bouncing bonnets were promenading among the decks. Samson ran as fast as he could to the top of the ship and hid behind the fourth funnel in an effort to get the best view. The ship's horn sounded and Titanic was on her way. She glided effortlessly through the glistening waves, and after 2 brief stops to pick up more passengers in France and Ireland, she journeyed across the Atlantic Ocean on her way to America. Now there was nothing more for Samson to do but discover Titanic herself. He decided to start up his exploration at the top of the ship. This was where the first-class cabins could be found. As he was scampering around, he became aware of a delicious smell wafting through the air. Samson's tummy began to rumble. In all the excitement, he had missed lunch. Samson followed the aroma and it led him to the dining hall. He had never seen such grandeur. Crystal chandeliers shone brightly in the dark, rich wooden panelling. Tall gentlemen in top hats led elegant ladies in long, swirling skirts as they swished around the magnificent staircase into the grand dining room. I can't see Samson. Where is he? Must be somewhere. Crisp linen tablecloths were set with silver cutlery and sumptuous food. Samson's mouth began to water. He slipped unseen under the tables and nibbled leftovers and crumbs until his tummy ached. Then he climbed to the top of the staircase, hid inside the majestic clock, and drifted to sleep, listening to the sounds of the string quartet. A few days later, as Samson was relaxing in his bed in the boiler room, he heard some of the other rats and mice talking excitedly. They were planning to attend a party in the third-class section of the ship. Samson decided that he would join them. When he arrived, the party was in full swing. The deck was crowded. Cheerful chattering and laughter could be heard above the lively fiddle music. Passengers were dancing to the sounds of reels and jigs, while others relaxed with a drink, happily watching the performances. Samson soon found the other mice gathered together in the corner, and he too joined in with the fun. It was very late when he returned to the boiler room. He hadn't been sleeping for long when he was awoken by a loud crash, and the ship creaked to a sudden halt. Samson was scared. He knew something was wrong. He scampered outside to find out what was happening. Shattered ice slid across the deck. Titanic had hit an iceberg. When he returned to the boiler room, Samson discovered to his dismay that it had already begun to fill with water. Titanic was sinking. Rats and mice were running to higher ground in an effort to escape. Samson followed them. Lots of panicking passengers had now arrived on deck. Everyone wanted to board the lifeboats, but it was clear there was not enough room for them all. Women and children clambered on board, and one by one the lifeboats were lowered into the sea. As he watched the last lifeboat disappear, Samson knew that he was in trouble. He had no way of escape. Titanic was plunging headfirst into the Atlantic Ocean. Samson was so frightened. He didn't want to end up like a drowned rat. He wrapped his tail tightly round the ship's railings and held on for all he was worth. Suddenly, there was an ear-shattering sound as Titanic split in two. Samson felt as though his heart was in his mouth when the rear of the ship plummeted into the sea. For a moment, the force of the impact dragged Samson underwater. His little legs paddled fiercely with the immense effort, and he reached the ocean's surface. Gasping for breath, he swam through the icy waters towards a piece of driftwood. He lay on top, shivering with fear and cold, and listening to the screams and whistles of Titanic's passengers as they pleaded for help. No one came, and it wasn't long before the panic was replaced by an eerie silence. It was 2 hours before another ship called Carpathia appeared. By that time, it was too late for many of the passengers. Samson was one of the lucky ones. He used all of his energy to climb off the driftwood onto the Carpathia. Confused and frightened, he hid between some old rope in the corner of the deck and stayed there for several days until the ship docked into New York. Unlike lots of others, he had been rescued and lived to tell his tale. He could now begin his new life in America, but Samson knew that however long and exciting his future would be, he would never forget his Titanic journey. So make sure you remember to check the home learning, because Mrs. Scott and Mrs. Race have set you some tasks. Hope you like that one. See you soon.